So you're buying a home, or maybe you own a home. Do you know what you need? You know what you probably have is homeowners insurance. And I tell you, homeowners insurance can be so involved and so complicated and so expensive. I've had a incredible, really enjoyable conversation with a local agent, Mr. Tom Rooney, and I'm going to share this conversation with you, and we're going to cover many topics that I'm sure you're going to appreciate. Stick around. Hi, welcome back. My name's Joe Brown. I'm a realtor with Century 21 List with Beggins, located in South Tampa. Thank you so much for being here with me today. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment if you hear something that's of interesting that you want to comment about. But most importantly, share this with your friends and family who you think could benefit from this information. So last week, I introduced a conversation I had with Mr. Tom Rooney of Roney Insurance. And the whole conversation was about homeowners insurance. And so last week, and I'll put a link to the video here, last week we talked about the just homeowners insurance in general. Now I want to get more specific, right? Because here's the process. You're buying a house, and as a buyer, you have a home inspection. Well, the home inspection is going to look at many different things and point out different areas of concern, maybe their concerns. Insurance companies are going to want a 4-point inspection. Well, what does all of that mean with you? So we're going to pick up this conversation with Tom as he talks about the home inspection and 4-point inspection. Tom, take it away. One thing I face as a real estate agent is I've worked with buyers and they've gone to get homeowners insurance, and there are different, I guess, conditions that came up in a home inspection, which has prevented a carrier from writing the policy. So as an insurance agent, what are some of those red flags in a home inspection report that you say, that's got to be fixed before I can insure it?
Yeah, certainly there's a lot of things in what's called a 4-point inspection report that we take a look at and that the carriers utilize typically in homes that are older than 30 years old. They take a look at the roof. So when we're looking at the roof, I guess, and let me see if I can share this document with you here, Joe.
Yeah, so Tom, talk about home inspections and what you as an insurance agency look for in home inspections.
Yeah, from an insurance perspective, although you as a customer may be very interested in a detailed home inspection, that's not really the report that the insurance company is interested in. They're interested in, if your home is older than 30 years old, a lot of times they want a 4-point inspection report. That 4 points going to take a look at the roof, your HVAC, your AC unit, the plumbing, and the electrical. So those are the 4 key components that are talked about and addressed in the 4-point inspection reports. A lot of times that's done by typically by a general contractor or a certified home inspector, and typically the same individual that's done your detailed home inspection report can do that 4-point as well. He or she has probably gathered all of that information in conjunction with your detailed report, and they're certainly well versed in that, as well as really all of the realtors now are doing a great job in terms of gaining that report on older homes as well. So we've kind of touched a little bit about the roof. So certainly the carriers want to see at least 3 to 5 years of remaining useful life on that roof, depending upon the company itself. So that's certainly an important factor with regards to the roof. The HVAC unit, it's becoming, some of the carriers are actually want to see that unit be 15 years or newer. So we've actually got one carrier now that in their underwriting guidelines, that's one of their requirements. Not in the majority of the carriers at this point in time, but it is one of the carriers' requirement that they want your AC unit to be within or newer than 15 years of age. So plumbing, some of the carriers do have an issue with cast iron or galvanized plumbing, not necessarily in your waste lines for those, because that's pretty common for the older homes to have those in the waste line running from the home out to the road. But if they're in their supply lines, those two types of plumbing can be an issue with some of the carriers out there. We certainly do have some that will accept that type of plumbing, provided that the 4-point inspection is showing that everything is acceptable. So that's certainly something that the carriers are going to take a look at on that 4-point. There's a number of different boxes that the inspector checks off. And if he says that those are not acceptable or some issues with leaks or things of that nature, then those are things that may need to be addressed before the policy can be bound or accepted by that company. Electrical, there are certain types of electrical boxes that the carriers do consider to be a potential fire hazard out there. That kind of varies by company as well. So it's good really to get the insurance agent or the company involved as soon as possible. They can review that inspection report to make sure that electrical box meets the guidelines for that carrier itself. So, and they do vary by carrier. So it is something that really that 4-point inspection does address, and something that we as an agent will take a look at to make sure that electrical box is acceptable and not considered a potential fire hazard, because otherwise it may need to be replaced either prior to the closing on the home or shortly thereafter.
So, Tom, I may get into a rabbit hole here, and I don't intend to. But if you think about the standard practice, right? So years ago, standard practice was cloth-clad wiring, and then maybe it was aluminum wiring. And now we're saying, yeah, no, we don't want to do any of that. I see some of the same happening in plumbing, in that it was, inside the house, the supply lines being copper wire, copper tubing, or PVC. And there's a new product out, I think it's called Dex or T-Dex or P-Dex or something like that, which is a flexible tubing that can run the length of the house. My daughter, the new home she bought, just had a small section of that, and insurance said, no, we're not going to insure that. So can you speak at all about the changing of the standard of practice or acceptable standards?
Yeah, typically most of the carriers, and that's a great question. Typically most of the carriers are good with the copper tube pipe in the home for the supply lines. They're good with the PVC pipe or the CPVC pipe as well. So that's typically what we're seeing a lot more in terms of the plumbing. The PEX plumbing is certainly, some of the carriers do have a bit of an apprehension about that. Typically, the carriers are all right if that PEX system is newer, let's say in the past 5 years. It's been installed. Sometimes they want to look at the main brain of that or distribution of those of that PEX plumbing in the house. So sometimes we do need to provide them with detailed photos of that in the home itself, which will have that main line coming into their distribution center, and then they'll have multiple different pipes of that flexible PEX that come off of that as well. So the carriers really depend upon the carrier, but some of the carriers do have an issue with the PEX plumbing, especially, let's say, if it's older than 10 years old, it may not be acceptable. But most of the carriers are willing to accept it if it's newer. I don't know that I think there's been some upgrades to that PEX system in the last 10 years. So they're a little bit more receptive to accepting that type of plumbing as well now.
And is the apprehension that because it's plastic, it could become brittle?
Yeah, I think that's certainly the concern really, is that it could become brittle over time. It's a newer product. I think they're concerned, I guess, about it potentially becoming brittle and springing a leak. That's certainly the number one cause of loss typically is a pipe leak. And certainly water travels in homes. So it doesn't take long if you're at work really for if a pipe bursts or it causes even a pinhole leak sometimes, if you're gone for 8 hours a day, that water can travel throughout the house and cause substantial damage. So certainly there's a concern by the carriers really with regards to older pipes or pipes that brittle over time and spring a leak.
So I know we didn't even talk about this, but it just thought popped in. With those pinhole leaks, sometimes they're behind the wall and mold develops.
Sure.
So what's the insurance stance on mold?
Yeah, typically mold is on every homeowner's policy. It's usually a sublimit on the policy. That sublimit can be increased on your policy, but now the mold coverage is on the policy, but there's usually a sublimit for that on your policy. So it is something that you may want to have a discussion with your agent on if you wish to increase that coverage, because certainly mold can develop behind the walls, as you mentioned, and certainly we live in a very humid climate here. And it doesn't take long, really, even a number of days, really, for that mold to develop behind the walls. And sometimes you may not even be aware of a small pinhole leak, and you've got mold developing, and it spreads. And certainly, a lot of your drywall and/or framing may need to be replaced, or flooring. Certainly, if that water's traveled under the floor as well, really. Because mold can develop quite quickly here in Florida. Hey,
thank you so much for being here with us today, listening to Tom Roney as he shares his insurance knowledge with all of us. So listen, I do these videos because I want to be of service to this area. I changed the game because of my knowledge. But I want you to change the game because of your knowledge. That's why I do these videos. And so hopefully you've learned something today that you can share. As I said, check out my website, joebrownc21.com. You can learn more about me. You can search for homes in the area. You can read my blogs. I love sharing this information with you because South Tampa, Florida living is awesome.